I expected a difference in operation once I plugged this cord in. I expected a difference in operation, and indeed there was. Hello! This is Ricky Klein, the Cassette Master, making another YouTube video. And this video, first of all, I'll tell you, is being recorded using a Sony SL5000 Betamax VCR. So all the video and audio you're hearing right now is from Betamax, believe it or not. Ripley's, believe it or not. You know, saying believe it or not, I have to be reminded of that. Well, look at this, what we got here. We got a suitcase. Yes, exactly, a suitcase. So what, I'm starting to collect suitcases too now? I would let you know on a side note, whenever I was a young child, I did like suitcases a lot. But no, this isn't the deal. It's what's inside the suitcase that matters. Now, not everything is inside the case that came with it. I took a couple things out and whatnot, but, you know, here's the deal. It's a reel-to-reel tape recorder. Now that you know what it is, the things I took out of it was, here's a microphone here, and here is a microphone right here, and you'll notice the recorder is in the bag, and there's another bag here which contained one of the microphones, another bag which contained the other microphone, I think, and it's also got the manual. I'll have to show the manual. Here we got the manual to the recorder. We also have the AC converter instructions, but I don't have an AC converter for it at all. I have a 12 volt DC converter right here. AC converter is not around. And I'll go ahead and let you know that it uses separate motor and amplifier batteries. And when you use the 12 volt converter, all it runs is the motor part, not the amplifier part. And inside the 12 volt converter, I haven't took it apart, but from electronics class and from seeing how it was operating, it's pretty obvious that there's probably, I'm pretty sure there's just a voltage divider with a couple of resistors inside this to bring it from 12 volts to 9 volts. And I'll go ahead and show the manual real quick. Now here where it's colored in red, I think perhaps somebody got a some kid probably got a marker or something and did that themselves. I don't think it originally would have been like that. It looks colored in if you look at it carefully. EP-2104, the infamous EP-2104. You'll find out why I call it infamous later when you listen to the tape. It's not infamous in general, but it's infamous in this particular one in my life. Here's the manual about things about batteries and the tape threading and stuff, and the 2-track system, and the VU meter / battery level indicator, which only shows battery levels of the the motor batteries, not the amplifier batteries. Here's the back of the manual. Look at that part that somebody wrote right there. Look at that old telephone number. Sanctioned. By the way, this recorder is from 1961. 1961. Okay. We showed you enough of the manual. If I can get it back in here. I'll also show all-purpose cord kit. I got a cord in here. There's also an attenuator cord that I have lying around somewhere, who knows where it is, that I used for other purposes. It's kind of lost right now. I don't know where it is. And there's another cord that was in here, right you'll also see in there, there's a shoulder strap. I don't know if it's ever been used. Probably hasn't. And a little spare phono plug. And I also have another cord. I have a cord that goes to a couple of alligator clips, and another cord that goes to a RCA plug, and the aforementioned attenuator somewhere. I also have two little Webcor earphone boxes inside it. Never been used, in their bags. Inside the two boxes are two earphones. Got more than enough Webcor earphones. I'll go ahead and let you know that even though this is Webcor is an American company, the actual recorder is made in Japan by another company. For that, let's get the recorder out. Now, I believe Clydeside has the same model recorder. He made a video called "What is Capstan Drive?" if I remember correctly. And if I remember correctly, is in capital letters. On Clydeside's video, "What is Capstan Drive?" he shows a Webcor recorder, which he said he couldn't get going. And I believe it's the same model, or one that's almost the same. And he showed the capstan flywheel and an example of how capstan drive works. Okay, now I'll show you about the actual company that made the recorder. Let's flip the recorder around. Notice it's in an all-metal case, although there's a thin plastic coating on this bottom part, which goes on top of metal. I like metal cases. Take off the battery compartment, zoom in. So you can see it uses 6 AA's for the motor. Take notice I'm using a dime right there to take place of one of the connector pieces, which probably corroded away. And it uses a 9-volt battery there for the amplifier. So each system runs on 9 volts each. Now for the fun part. Manufactured exclusively for Webcor Incorporated by Kowa Optical Works. Kowa spelled K-O-W-A. It's a Japanese camera company. So a company that normally makes cameras ended up making a tape recorder exclusively for Webcor, which is the same as Webster-Chicago, which made many wire recorders back in the day, the famous Webster-Chicago wire recorders. This tape recorder is model EP-2104. Of course, the Webcor company is in Chicago, Illinois, USA, licensed under Armor Patents. If you research about Armor, they were a big name in a lot of the very early tape recorder and wire recorder endeavors. Anyway, let's take some more looks at this recorder. There is the external power jack, and you'll also see a record button. To record, you hold down the button and push down the record button, the actual mechanical record button. It's an interlock. If it's out, you can't push record, so you can't accidentally erase. On this, you do not have to press record and play at the same time. Oh, sorry. There's a volume control, which is also recording level control. This is a manual level control. There's a remote jack, external amplifier jack, not an external speaker jack. I'll tell you about that later. And microphone. And there it says Microcorder. There's the controls, and there's the VU meter. And we can also take a quick look at right there. Don't worry, you'll see more later. The recorder has a tail to tail. The recorder has a tale to tell. First, we must put the right reels onto the recorder. Take notice the speed selector. It's not a capstan sleeve type. It's a belt jump system. Well, I prepared. I should have set the counter. Not set the counter. I prepared my monologue recording. Got a connection deal. Okay. So, of course, it's not from the start of this tape. It's recorded but not fully prepared because I have to cue it. And since the recording is so long, let's get that to 3/4 real quick. This recording's so long, and I don't have all the batteries in the world. Actually, I'm really low on good AA batteries because I use them so much, especially in my Walkman. But anyway, I'm going to use the adapter to run in place of the motor batteries. So, since this has a voltage divider inside with resistors, current is quite limited. When I'm running 12 volts here and getting 9 volts out, the current is limited a lot, and the motor just doesn't run very strongly, and especially on rewind, it's slow and sluggish when using this. So I want to unplug that, and see that that plug with the thing in the middle? The thing in the middle is to keep you from plugging it into an AC plug. I'm going to run it right to this because the current limiting resistors are in here. I'm not going to use that. Just going to do it here. Use alligator clips, and the power supply, I'm going to use it. I got an old Heathkit IP-20 power supply from 1963. This is a very nice regulated power supply. Goes all the way up to 50 volts and 1.5 amps. I'm going to use this power supply to power the motor of the Webcor to save on battery power, aside from the 9-volt battery which runs the amplifier. Sorry. Set it the 10-volt range, and then I'm going to set that, see there? I'm going to set that to 9 volts, regulated DC. I think that's enough, but I'll try. I have it at 150 milliamps, and if that's too little, I'll increase it to the 500 milliamp current limit setting. Now this recorder does not cut off the battery power when you plug in the other battery. The external power. So I'm not going to take them all out, but I want to take out some of them so it doesn't put power across the batteries, which is probably not very good for it. The top scale of the meter, the 15 being 150, the 10 being 100, and the milliamp scale. So the machine takes about 85 milliamps on the motor. 85 milliamps. And watch it spike higher when it first turns on. Pretty cool, eh? And just for fun, if you want, you can hear Amberola 1B, Ed Ferraro's tests that he did on the Funnel Tricks recorder that he gave me, because he also included this tape with it. and it was recorded at a higher speed than 3 3/4. Just listen. Impressive. You can do a semi-fast forward by holding down the pen stroller and letting the take-up do its job.
I'm recording with the Grundig Nikki. Reel-to-reel tape recorder. It would sure be nice if this didn't have.
And now it begins. Okay, here we go. Here's our long speech on this Webcor reel-to-reel tape recorder, model EP-2104, recording at 3 3/4 inches per second. The saga will begin now. The long, long saga. Imagine most YouTubers watching this video will probably think I got this recorder quite recently because I'm just now making a video on it. Well, let me tell you something. I got this machine working quite recently, so you might think, oh, I got it quite recently. And where did you get it? You might ask. I got it from eBay. I think I paid $15 or something for it, and then also shipping. I think shipping was probably $10 or something like that. But anyway, no, I didn't just recently acquire this recorder. I got this recorder 6 years ago. I got it in the summer of 2006 when I was 15 years old. Yes, 15. It was my second acquisition of a portable reel-to-reel tape recorder, and the first time I would be getting 3-inch reels. I had the Lloyd's reel-to-reel rim drive recorder. I have a video of that one already. Has no model number. Has a crystal microphone. Pretty bad sound quality. Lloyd's. I had that Lloyd's, although I hadn't probably got it working, and I didn't have any 3-inch reels. So then I went on eBay with some the idea of getting 3-inch reels. Went on eBay and I found this recorder, and it was a good deal, and it had all these accessories, microphone, had 2 microphones. It even had some reel-to-reel tapes with it. The reel-to-reel tapes, I don't know where I put them. I took them out of here years ago and don't know where I placed them, but I have the reel-to-reel tapes here somewhere, which I remember one of the reel-to-reel tapes had like a little girl playing piano or something on it. But anyway, I got this recorder off eBay in 2006. It was a great deal. I was really excited about getting this. It was in extremely good cosmetic condition, working condition. I don't remember if they said it worked. It was probably as is. I think it was just as is. But, untested probably. But it was in great cosmetic condition. I was like, oh, this is great. I mean, having a really cool portable reel-to-reel, because at that time this was only my second acquisition of any portable reel-to-reels, aside from one that I had borrowed years ago in 2001 or 2002. But I had since given back. So I was very excited about getting this reel-to-reel tape recorder. And whenever I got it, I was about to do my first test. I was very excited. So I put batteries in it, used a dime as a spacer on one of the battery parts, put in my AA's, put in my 9-volt, had tapes with it, so I was finally able to have a 3-inch reel to record on. I found a 3-inch reel, I put it on play. I found out that there was some music recorded on the 3-inch reel. Then it after that I went to like blank tape afterwards or something, so I was excited. I was going to try recording on it for the first time, so I was already established that the amplifier was working on playback. Now it also had a hardened pinch roller, so it was slipping some. I had to be careful there with the tape, but it pretty much freed up where it was working properly and it's not slipping. So I remember the first time I went to make that first recording in 2006. The level meter was fluctuating nicely. Oh, it was great. I was excited. Who knows how my new reel-to-reel portable was going to sound. After I made the recording, I rewound the tape. I went back to playback, only to hear silence. It seemed that it had erased or something had come on, some hiss come on for the recording. And I could hear perhaps a very, 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 and I mean very, 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 very faint recording, which might have been there, but who knows. The thing did not record. It did not record. I thought, oh, it's just leaky capacitors. I'll go in and replace some of the electrolytics and I'll see if that will fix it. So a few electrolytics I replaced, doing nothing. Replace electrolytics, nothing. So I finally gave up. And then later on that year, or maybe the next year, I'd get it out, try working on it some more. Maybe I can fix it this time. I even had the idea I was going to keep working on it non-stop until I got it fixed. And I made it worse. And then I tried working on it again some time later, maybe 2008, 2009. I made it even worse. Some of these little tiny wires inside would come off at the soldering joints, and I wouldn't remember exactly where they connected. So I would connect some wires up, guessing or trying to find out. And I would connect the speaker up to the wrong place. I would connect some things up to the wrong place. I would make it worse. I put in a transistor backwards, didn't even realize it until recently. Whenever I was trying to replace a bias transistor and could never get the bias oscillator work, and I could never get it to record. It was a very sad thing. Almost out of tape. Goodness gracious, didn't know it would be that short. Get out the next tape, please, now. And of course, another tape will have to be rewound. And the rewinding is in progress. You have started up the next tape for continuation of the speech I'm giving on the Webcor EP-2104. Okay, anyway, back to the story. So I left off at where I tried working on it again, and I would make the problem worse. Of course, it wouldn't record, and I had tried putting in replacing a bias transistor with a silicon transistor, guessing, oh, maybe one of the bias transistors went bad, and that didn't work. So later on another fixing or attempted fixing session over the course of 6 years. Now I didn't try that a whole lot of times, but I tried a few times. I tried several times to fix this. Several times, off and on, from 2006 to now. Although actually I haven't touched it in 3 years since I moved here until just yesterday. But anyway, back to it. So, okay, ADD, okay. So, I eventually put the original bias transistor back in, and still the bias oscillator wouldn't work, still wouldn't record. So I had some wires, of course, since little tiny wires would come off the circuit board that I had to keep flipping upside down and right side up and so forth. The wires would come off. I'd try to solder it back. I wouldn't remember exactly where the wires would go, so I would try to guess and check, and I soldered the speaker in the wrong place. I soldered the erase head in the wrong place, or something in the wrong place. No, I didn't solder the erase head in the wrong place, but I soldered the speaker in the wrong place. I soldered stuff in the wrong place. And I shorted out one part because back whenever I was working on it in that past time, I didn't have a desoldering iron. So I would have to hold the soldering iron up to the circuit board while trying to pull the lead of a suspect component out. And by holding the heat on the circuit board for extended periods of time over and over again does not do a good job, holding it on there for a long time is not something well received by the printed circuit traces. So sometimes a small portion of printed circuit trace would come off, and I would have to stick the new component lead in and bend it over where the other component leads went, or the other remaining circuit trace was. So, during one part of that, something got shorted out, although I didn't know I shorted anything out, because the amplifier was still working and amplifying. Because remember, it worked in playback, not record. So I made it worse. I got it to where when I turned the volume up close to all the way, there'd be this annoying kind of oscillating in the amplifier. It would just do this annoying, and it was just like, it was ridiculous. So I made it worse. I got it to do that stupid thing, and also it all came magically to the weight, so that whenever I tried putting it in record mode, the audio that to be recorded would come blaring on through the speaker and feeding back and everything, when it was not supposed to do that at all. When it's recording, the speaker's cut off. But it would just come out blaring through the speaker, so I was like, oh, I couldn't figure out exactly what I connected wrong and stuff. So it was, again, a failed attempt at trying to fix this machine, which has become infamous to me because of its many times I tried working on it and I had no improvement. I've only made it worse the times I tried working on it, aside from replacing some bad electrolytics, minus a couple that were still left in there until yesterday. So finally, yesterday came, August the 15th, 2012. And in the middle of the day, the start of the afternoon, I had the idea, you know what? It would really be nice to get that Webcor recorder fixed. And I had the idea before of ordering a Sam's Photo Fact for it and just overhauling the entire circuit board pretty much. But that never happened. The day before or so, I looked on the internet at Sam's Photo Fact and looked for the schematic of this recorder, and every single possible thing I could find, whether it be a it was all Sam's Photo Facts actually. They were either eBay or download, and of course the downloads, you had to pay money. Every single thing, it was pay money to either order it or download. I did not want to pay money for the service manual for this recorder. I wanted to be able to download it or at least find a picture of the schematic. I couldn't even find a picture of the schematic. I find all these wrong schematics, Webcor this, Webcor that. These wrong Webcors is like amplifiers or something, guitar amplifiers, I don't know. I was finding the wrong schematics. I couldn't find anything. I was like, oh, this is ridiculous. But finally, yesterday came. I finally decided, well, I'm going to open this thing up, and I'm going to try again. And I decided this time I was really going to delve into this thing. I was really going to study this thing. I figured, well, I've had a lot more experience since 2006, since the last times. I've learned a lot more since then. Maybe I can tackle it this time. So I decided to go ahead and delve into it with no schematic, with no service manual. Got it out of the garage amongst all the boxes and stuff. Got the recorder, put it on my workbench. I prayed the Lord's will would be done. I asked that He'd allow it to be fixed and help me fix it and everything, which ultimately, by hearing this recording, you know that He answered that with a yes. So, how are my motor batteries doing? Well, that's beside the point. Anyway, so I really got working on it. I have my oscilloscope, my voltmeter, continuity meter, all this test equipment there. So I could really work on it. So I started really just looking at things and trying to reason, well, why isn't this doing this? Why isn't this doing that? I replaced the two leftover electrolytics, which one of them was a little bit leaky, one of them was quite leaky. And that, of course, wasn't the problem. The problem was not capacitors with the recording. I tested with the oscilloscope from the head, the record head during record mode. And not only was there no bias oscillator signal, but there is absolutely no audio signal coming to the head. Absolutely no audio signal, even though it had good capacitors. The transistors were fine in the amplifier. So I started looking at things further. I started looking at the configuration of the external amplifier jack and how it cuts the speaker off during whenever you plug into it. Excuse me, burped. I was really looking at things. So finally I decided I tried testing some resistors. The resistors were fine. I looked at the record play switch close up, which is separate from the circuit board. And I looked at how it switched, where things switched to. I tried to figure out when it was recording, where the audio signal and how it would come into the head. So I followed back the wires and I found it go to a certain point on the circuit board. And I noticed that it went through a bunch of resistors and capacitors, very small value capacitors, ceramic capacitors. I think that was to equalize it. And through that it went to a winding on the output transformer. Another winding separate than the other output winding which drove the speaker. I got my ohm meter out. I tested the windings on the output transformer. The speaker winding was fine. The input windings were fine. But the winding which would have been a higher impedance winding, which gave the output to the through the resistors and capacitors to equalize it, and then into the head, which of course whenever it went there it joined along with the bias. But that particular winding which gave the audio output was, lo and behold, open. It had a bad winding on the output transformer. So that was a surefire, obvious reason why it wouldn't record anything. Then on to the bias oscillator. I started looking close at the bias oscillator and I was trying to figure out whether it was a one transistor bias oscillator or a two transistor push-pull bias oscillator. Pretty sure all two transistor bias oscillators are push-pull, so I'm guessing it's a push-pull. But so I started looking at the two transistors on the opposite sides of the bias coil. I also tested the bias coil. Luckily, no open windings. Thank goodness. On the back of the circuit board where the transistors connected, on some of the connections you could see where the base collector and emitter were labeled. At least where the emitter and base were labeled on one of the transistors. So I looked, and first of all I noticed that both transistors had connections going into the bias coil or through a capacitor to the bias coil. So I knew that the bias oscillator used both transistors. So from that, I then noticed that one of the transistors that I had put back in was put in backwards. The dot, which marks the collector, I had put on to where the emitter was labeled on the circuit board, which I probably didn't even notice the emitter labeled earlier. So I had put one of the bias transistors on backwards, so obviously that's an obvious likely reason for why the bias oscillator wouldn't work, so I replaced it. I put in another transistor, just in case the other one might have been bad. I later on ended up putting the original back in because it performed better than the other that I tried putting in. So ultimately the original transistor got put back in, and of course back in correctly. So I put the transistor in, went to replace the output transformer. Now where am I going to find this special output transformer? The input winding is a center tap winding. The output has got two output parts, probably something like 8 ohms for the speaker. It measured very low on the ohm meter, but that's because it was DC. I'm guessing I'm sure the impedance would have been higher, probably. it was for the speaker. And the other winding would have been a much higher impedance, which would have been the record head winding. So I was lucky enough to have a recorder which was for parts. It was an RCA 5-inch reel-to-reel portable, a machine that I had got off eBay in 2008 and plugged in 120 volts into a 9-volt input jack, which was the same style jack used for 120 volt plugs on many machines. It was a recorder in which I had blown the amplifier and blown the motor and couldn't get it back working. It was a machine that at the time had been an absolute catastrophe. A horrible thing I had done, which turned out for good, because it had an output transformer which had the close enough impedances and the same winding configuration and almost the same size that I was able to replace it into this Webcor. So I put in the output transformer from that RCA reel-to-reel, which luckily was undamaged. What? So I put in that transformer, and then I soldered everything back. A lot of the connections I knew from memory, because I looked at it for so long, working on it. But of course I had it all on a paper too, and some connections I did need to look at the paper to know where they went. So I put that all back together, the circuit board back on, and then I went to test. I turned on it in record mode, got my my digital multimeter, put it to the head to measure AC voltage, and sure enough I had a bias voltage was about 4.8 volts, and which was too low. And then I had also 40 kilocycle or 40 kilohertz bias oscillation, which was good. But then I figured the voltage was too low because the recording sounded distorted, so I put in the original transistor back in. And after I put the original transistor back in, the bias voltage was increased to 29 volts, and the distortion was not as bad. There is still sibilance, but I guess that's just the equalization, just the way it is. Can't do much about that. But here's another story section. Please switch to 1 7/8. Please switch to 1 7/8. Okay, now I know the machine is noisy at 1 7/8, unfortunately, the way it is, the spring belt and all. But I put it back and everything, and then I had a problem where the sound, after I put it back together, the sound was extremely muffled. Even the 3G-Force, the sound had like zero treble. But whenever I played recordings made on it on other machines, there was some treble, but it was worse when playing it on this machine. I thought the heads were magnetized, so I demagnetized the heads. No avail. I tried several more times to demagnetize the heads. No avail. I got out my bulk tape eraser, took the heads off the recorder, put the bulk eraser up to the heads, which was way stronger than the regular demagnetizer. I thought for sure I got them demagnetized now. Still, no avail. I tried some silly tape recorder, like from a Clyde site, and I found out that the recording seemed almost the same as when it was on another recorder's heads, which made me think maybe it wasn't the heads, or it gave me the clue that it might have not been the heads. So I went in the machine thinking, oh, the bias was too strong and the treble wasn't strong enough. But whenever I went there and I had the recorder apart, the treble was back, and it had nothing to do with the bias. Turned out that something was shorting out, I think, whenever the speaker was pressing hard on the circuit board, was pushing the capacitor against, and it was causing a short circuit somewhere inside, which caused the treble to get lost on the amplifier itself. I fixed that problem, moved the capacitor out of the way, and now the treble's back and the machine works properly. So now I have a properly working Webcor EP-2104 recorder. 6 transistors total, 4 transistor amplifier, 2 transistor bias oscillator, AC bias, DC erase. Bias oscillator is about 40 kilohertz, more like 39 point something kilohertz. Bias voltage 29 volts. Don't remember what the DC erase voltage was, but it's less than a volt, I think. I think it's like 0.5 volts or something. And yeah, so there you have it. My long monologue taking up 2 using of reels on the Webcor EP-2104. And yeah, then I'll show more of it after this, including how it records music. That was a super long monologue, speech, tale, saga, whatever you want to call it, on this Webcor reel-to-reel tape recorder about the adventures of trying to fix and finally succeeding on fixing the infamous, notorious Webcor EP-2104 by the Kowa Camera Company in Japan. Tape recorder on June the 5th, 2012. Ooh, can't record on that side of the tape. I'm going to have to rewind it again to show music and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, exactly. This recorder. Yeah, this video is super long. I apologize for any of those who don't like long videos. Although if there are any of you who love a long video, then well, it's a long video. So I'll do some rewinding, I'll record some music on the recorder so you can hear how it records music. I'm hoping my Betamax VCR will do a good job capturing the higher frequencies. I don't know the frequency response of this recorder. Of course, the manual doesn't have any specs shown, nor does it have the schematic, obviously. But excuse me, maybe someday I could try to measure the frequency response. I do have a signal generator. Maybe I could do it someday, but don't count on me doing it, because I probably won't. But anyway, I'll be getting some music recorded on this. I'll show you how it records music, and we'll go from there. Before I do that, let me show you more detail of the microphones. So here is one Webcor microphone. They are both dynamic, has a on-off switch, and separate mic and remote jacks. Now here's one interesting thing I need to show about this recorder and the size of its jacks. This jack is a standard size, I think it's 1/8 inch jack, the same jack as a typical jack like on a headphone or something, or like this. It's the same size. And then the remote jack is that smaller size jack, which is the same size as other remote jacks. But the microphone jack is bigger than the remote jack, of course. But the microphone jack and the other jacks on here, the mic and the external amplifier jack, are smaller than your standard phone jack. If I try to plug in a standard phone jack, you see here, I take, say, the Sony microphone here, standard size. I'll plug it in, it won't fit. External amp, it won't fit. that uses its own strange in-between size. That's just very weird. I don't know why they did that. Maybe they wanted you to get proprietary microphones and cables for the Webcor. But that's very strange. So I have two microphones for it. Here's the other one. Doesn't have a on-off switch, just a mic Webcor. And this one here has a little stand on it. So I'm glad to have these mics and all these excuse me, all these patch cables, because this thing uses weird sized jacks. Let's give a quick showing. Let's actually demonstrate the recording in progress. Before we showed it playing a recording that was done off camera. Now we're going to show it actually record. You'll see that I fixed the problem I explained about the speaker running in record mode. It was just I soldered the ground side of the speaker on the wrong place. You can see the meter fluctuate. This is manual level control. When the level's set high, it can get very sensitive. The level set all the way up, and you can see it's very sensitive and picks up and overdrives very easily. When I set the level lower, I can speak up a little closer, and I can be careful not to drive it too high, but you can see this has quite a range of sensitivity. The upper part of the meter that says level is obviously for your recording, with the black portion being the overdrive portion. And then under it you see the little minus and plus. That's for your motor battery indication. Whenever it's in the plus, your motor batteries are good, and when it's in the minus, you got to replace them. Pretty straightforward. So now we'll show that playback. A little disappointing that there's sibilance in the recording. I think that's because the equalization is trying to boost the treble a whole lot, and the tape can't quite handle it well, so it's causing it to distort. The upper part of the meter that says level is obviously for your recording. So, you know, pretty neat. Speaker on the wrong place. You can see the meter fluctuate. This is manual level control. When the level's set high, it can get very sensitive. The level's set all the way up, and you can see it's very sensitive and picks up and overdrives very easily. When I set the level lower, I can speak up a little closer, and I can be careful not to drive it too high, but you can see this has quite a range of sensitivity. The upper part of the meter that says level is obviously for your record. So, there is a quick demonstration of actually recording. You already heard how it sounded at 1 7/8, so I'm not going to go trying to show that. But we can go ahead and we'll be recording some music on our little Webcor, and we'll see how it goes. Oh, wait a second. My VCR was paused for so long that it automatically went back to unpause and recording. Sorry there. I'm recording the music onto the tape right now. Oh yeah, I gotta use my foot switch. Here is another patch cable piece. And here's another patch cable piece, plugs into the RCA, and it goes to this, one of those odd sized jacks. Without further ado, let's show how this plays music. Well, not just plays music, because the music was recorded using this recorder through a patch cable. And first I'll play some of it through its speaker, and then I'll hook it right into the VCR so you can hear how it sounds directly out of the external amplifier jack. So first to the speaker. The song is called Halo by Severed Heads. Now let's hear how it sounds directly from the external amplifier jack. Sounds quite tinny, doesn't it? That might, perhaps one of the reasons might be because the external amplifier jack is driven from the amplifier through a 0.01 microfarad capacitor, and I'm sure that does not allow very much bass to go through. So before we go, I know this video is longer than the Nile River, but we're going to see how this caliphone, I know this is an odd angle to show it at, we're going to see how this caliphone recorder plays it back, because I think this has more bass response on recording than it does on playback, I think. Dang it!
I guess I could say it's still pretty tinny, not much bass response.
Okay, well, it turns out it's not much bass response, period. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video of the Webcor. The Webcor EP-2104 reel-to-reel tape recorder from 1961. This has been the longest tape recorder presentation video I have ever done.
Webster.